So, we've been talking a lot about websites and web requests and web servers. Let's build a little mini website so that I can show you in a little more detail how URL paths work. So, let's start with an index.html file, and feel free to follow along on your own computer. So, I've created a new directory. I've just called it test. And in that directory, I've created this index.html file. And we're going to put in here some HTML tags. We'll just do something really simple, really simple. So HTML body and then an H1 header tag that just says homepage. Okay, so this is the HTML file that will render into a simple web page that just says homepage in large. Cool. Next, let's add a subfolder. We'll call it blog. Let's give it its own index.html file. And this one will be very similar. In fact, I'll just copy and paste this, and we'll just swap it out to say blog page instead of home page. Okay. And then just one more file I want to add at the root. We'll just call this name.txt. So instead of an HTML file, this is just a text file. Okay. And this one will just say, hi, my name is Lane. Cool. So this is the structure of our simple website. Now, in order to actually access these files over the network, we need a web server. So we're going to use one called Caddy, C-A-D-D-Y. I installed Caddy on Mac by just typing brew install Caddy. But if you're on a different operating system, head over to caddyserver.com. Just Google Caddy, and I'm sure you'll find it. And you can find instructions for how to install it on your own machine. Once you have it installed, you're going to need to be on your command line in the same directory that has all these files we just created. So I'm in the test directory here on my command line, and I'll run caddy file-server. Now, by default, the server is going to bind to port 80, which is the default HTTP port, and it's going to use localhost, which is just the domain of my own computer, right? So I'm connecting to my own computer on port 80. So when I go to localhost port 80 in my browser, which again is the default, so I don't really need to type port 80, I should get, right, this rendered view of index.html.txt. Well, traditional file servers will typically route the path of a directory, which in this case would just be the root, which is /, to a file called index.html in that directory, just by convention. For example, if I wanted to get name.txt, if I just wanted to get that text file, I could actually just go directly to name.txt and I'd get that file. Caddy is taking the path /name.txt and mapping it to /name.txt on my file system. Hopefully that makes sense. Similarly, if I wanted to see this blog page, I could go to /blog. And again, because blog is a directory, Caddy is automatically redirecting, right, that request from blog to blog index.html. Right? If I were to type index.html, I'd get the same thing. So at this point, you may be thinking, well, that's great. So a URL path is just the same thing as a file system path once you've hooked up a web server. That's not exactly true. By convention, many static file servers just use the path to the file on your disk as the path in the URL, but it doesn't have to work that way. At the end of the day, the server software, in this case Caddy, can do whatever it wants. We could completely change how we parse the path of a URL and what we want to respond with. Many frameworks, backend web frameworks work this way, right? If you write a server in Go or in Django, there will often be a lot of custom logic that determines how different paths in a URL are handled and what files and data will be responded with when certain paths are accessed.